Hello, in this video I'm going to be providing evidence that suggests that the people of Atlantis practiced human sacrifice. And these are clues that come from Plato's dialogues, and in general from what we know about history and what we know about cultures that do practice human sacrifice. So the larger question is, what was the religion of Atlantis, Diluvian world, which was published in 1882, and is considered one of the most important works in the history of Atlantis research? He said that sun worship was their religion, but this was a very convoluted argument, and it doesn't really reference Plato's dialogues, but is trying to say that because Egypt and the Inca Empire are um, can trace their civilization back to Atlantis, and these cultures worship the sun, therefore Atlantis worshiped the sun too. And that's a very convoluted argument, and maybe you'll accept that, but it's kind of I don't think that's a very convincing argument, at least to me. But what did Plato have to say about the religion of Atlantis? Well, we know that one of their rituals was hunting a bull and sacrificing it. So we know that animal sacrifice was practiced by Atlantis. And it may have been just within the royal family, or it could have been a more general practice. That's not really, it's not said one way or another by the dialogues themselves. What we know about Atlantis is that they practice a cruel and unusual punishment in a sense. They made very liberal use of criminal punishment, and there was no trial by jury or due process for the common person. The quote says, "Each of the 10 kings in his own division had the absolute control of his citizens, and in most cases of the laws, punishing and slaying whomsoever he would." So essentially, the king had absolute power over all of his citizens. And the members of the royal house were better off, but not really by much, with the king only needing a majority of the 10 kings in order to put to death a member of the royal house, that is, the kinsmen of the king. So clearly, life is not very valuable. There's very little value attached to human life in Atlantis, and people can be killed by the decision of a single person. And so there's a quote describing the law of Poseidon and the punishment that was due to those who would transgress against it, saying, "Now on the pillar, besides the laws, there was inscribed an oath invoking mighty curses on the disobedient." And so you have all the clues that point to a civilization that practiced human sacrifice. You have, first of all, the existence of animal sacrifice, which means that the idea of sacrificing to perform a ritual is already very much accepted in that society. You have the absolute power of the authorities with no checks and balances on their power to punish. And third of all, you have a very religious and conservative minded society that has these laws written on a on a pillar, and it just obeys those laws, references those laws. Those laws are at the center of the society, and that and you have the so-called father figure of Poseidon, who is responsible for maintaining order throughout the universe. All those beliefs combined together point to a civilization that practiced human sacrifice. And if it were the case that human exception to civilizations, then we would require a greater burden of proof to conclude that Atlantis likely practiced human sacrifice. But human sacrifice, even as recent as a few thousand years ago, was widely practiced among cultures in the old world. For example, there are references to human sacrifice in the Bible when Abraham was about to sacrifice his son Isaac, but then God intervened while he was about to do it. And also, there are references to human sacrifice in the Iliad, where Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, was about to sacrifice daughter to appease Artemis, who is one of the Greek gods. And so that sacrifice may have actually been carried out, or it may have been stopped again right before it was about to be carried out. But the key concept is that human sacrifice was a widespread custom in the old world about during the Bronze Age, or just about then. And in the New World, it was common even at the time of the discovery of the New World by the Europeans in the Aztec Empire. Not just the Aztecs. The Aztec practice of human sacrifice is very well known, but in fact it was more widespread, and it was present in the Inca Empire. It was present in the many Native American tribes that inhabited North America. It was present in the Maya, for example, the Maya ball game ritual. And so every civilization that, and because Atlantis predates these civilizations by much, much more. Atlantis existed around 12,000 years ago, if you were to take Plato at his word. And I've made another video in which I try to, this really was 12,000 years old. And so it seems very, very likely that Atlantis is one of these prototypical human sacrifice practicing civilizations that has this rigid religious, this very rigid religious worldview that already practices animal sacrifice, and where these punishments and these crimes are handed down by this very, very small decision-making body, which in the case of Atlantis is just one of the 10 kings. And so it doesn't really directly say in Plato's dialogues that Atlantis practiced history, and knowing what we can know about Atlantis from the dialogues, I think the chances of Atlantis having practiced human sacrifice are essentially greater than 50%.